I think we've created at Axiom, and we continue that at the law firm, an environment that is phenomenally respectful of the independence of the legal judgment. Actually, we respect that very much, which is why we want to show in Arizona that we have the ability to do that and debunk some of these arguments that just don't make any sense.
Today on LawNext, Axiom, a company that is one of the longest-running alternative legal services providers, this week stepped into the world of regulated legal services providers as it formally launched Axiom Advice and Counsel, an Arizona law firm. The move was enabled by the Arizona Supreme Court's decision last May to grant Axiom an alternative business structure license. And that followed from Arizona's decision in 2020 to become the first U.S. state to eliminate the ban on non-lawyer ownership of law firms, a development we've discussed several times on this podcast, including when our guest was Arizona Supreme Court Vice Chief Justice Ann Timmer, who was not only among the justices who approved the changes, but who chaired the task force that recommended them. Joining me today to discuss the launch of Axiom Advice and Counsel is Catherine Chemnitz. She is Chief Strategy and Development Officer at Axiom, as well as its Chief Legal Officer. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you are listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. Before we get to that conversation, let me share a word about a product that can help you practice law more efficiently. As an attorney, it is essential to prioritize your client's needs. Practice Panther can help you do just that by automating your internal processes and taking care of administrative tasks so you can focus on building stronger relationships. With features like case management, automated billing, and document storage, Practice Panther has everything you need to help you focus on your clients. Thousands of law firms already trust Practice Panther to manage their practices. Find out why at practicepanther.com. Now on to today's conversation. Catherine, welcome to LawNext.
Thank you. Very glad to be here. Very exciting.
This is really interesting news, and I'm glad you can be here to discuss it. I was going back through some of what I've written about Axiom over the years, and I came across a post back when David McVeigh, who's the current CEO, came on board, and the prior CEO left. Prior CEO made a statement saying, "An Axiom is ready to take the industry by storm." So that seemed fitting for some of the news we're going to be talking about today.
We hope so. We have to stay in line with the DNA of Axiom over all these years and continuing to innovate in the space of delivery of legal services. So we're very excited by the change that enabled that.
Before we talk about all that, I just wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what your role is at Axiom.
So as you mentioned, I have a couple of hats today in strategy development and legal. I joined Axiom almost 9 years ago, and since then I've had a variety of roles. I joined initially to open an office here in the Twin Cities and evolved into operational role, trying to get Axiom to be ready for going public, something you talked about on this podcast as well at the time, which led to the spin-offs in 2019, which I led the execution of, and then ultimately the acquisition by Primera, and like you said, the arrival of David McVeigh. Prior to Axiom, I started my career at Sherman & Sterling. I was an associate there for many years, and then joined Thomson Reuters, where I did corporate development. So I've been seeing the industry from many different lenses. At TR, I did the acquisition of Practical Law by Thomson Reuters. And so I've had the opportunity to see the space, both in terms of all the innovators and in the legal tech, and then with Axiom expanding with a great focus on talent. So it's been quite an interesting journey.
You've been a witness to a lot of the history of legal innovation and legal technology.
I was counting the years, and I realized, wait, was it really 30 years when I embarked on this? I didn't necessarily expect to stay legal, but I think this is going to become, I'm passionate about what we're trying to do as Axiom is, and it's very interesting to kind of blend all these experiences to continue to keep things moving.
So, Catherine, we're here today to talk about this news that I guess, effective yesterday or officially yesterday, Axiom has opened Axiom Advice and Counsel, a law firm in Arizona. And there are a lot of dimensions to that I want to talk about. But I mean, why don't we start with kind of the big picture of why you wanted to do this in the first place?
Yes, there's several reasons. Obviously, for more than 20 years, Axiom's been innovating in the delivery of legal services and trying to find ways to bring more values to our clients as we do that. Axiom obviously is a company that provides talent to in-house teams and in-house counsels, but it is not allowed and it does not practice law. It never takes that last step of delivering the actual legal advice. We provide lawyers who deliver that advice. The change in Arizona allows us to create an entity, an independent law firm that will be able to deliver that service to our clients. And we think that this is extremely complementary to the value that Axiom provide. It also allows us to innovate not just next to the law firms, but within the law firms, and to really be able to create a model there that both for the partners who operate within the firm and for our clients continues to bring more value. And especially in today's environment where we continue to have this absurd sort of disconnect between law firm rates and the economic environment, we think this is particularly important. And then the last thing I would add is Axiom today cannot work with companies who do not have in-house counsel because the lawyers need that supervision from in-house counsel. And so this allows us to start bringing the value and some of the offerings to a different kind of market of growth company who desperately need that value, but yet need the excellence of legal counseling. And so we hope to have the ABS law firm has that ability and bring it to that new market, who then eventually will someday hire their in-house counsel, and hopefully we can continue working with them and provide more offerings to them.
And why Arizona? I mean, are you opening a firm in Arizona primarily because that's where you can? Or are there other things about Arizona that make it suitable for you doing this?
Yeah, definitely because we can. We cannot do that in other states except for Utah. And I would say that Arizona obviously is a very interesting legal market, but beyond that, it's also a permanent change. And so we're going to watch other states. We're hopeful that many other states will learn from not just the Arizona, but the UK experiment that's been going on for now 10 years and get comfortable with implementing similar kind of rule changes so that we can work with more talent and more lawyers and bring them on as partners in other states. And that's sort of driving this change. That being said, this is also, like I said, something that's alive in the UK, and we are looking at that as we speak. And then there are other jurisdictions where Axiom actually operates in Australia, Canada, Singapore. And the ideal ultimately would be to have a sort of a partner, sister law firm who has a similar footprint to that of Axiom, so that we can really bring that global service to our clients seamlessly.
So I was going to ask you that later on, but I'll ask you that now since you raised it. You are considering looking to become an ABS in the UK as well?
Yes, we actually just got approval, just before the holidays, we got approval for the ABS in the UK, and we are now going to, alongside the build out in Arizona, going to move towards that. And, for Arizona, I would add one more thing. You talked about the motivation to do this. I think it's also, for us, very important to continue to support the re-regulation and the transformation of the industry. We believe that it needs modernization, and that in order to achieve some of the goals of this regulation, you need players like Axiom to go in there and show that this can be done, and it can be done with the utmost respect for the rules of professional conduct, something that we've done for now 20 years. And so to us, it's very important to continue to be a leader and an opener of doors there.
So just on a very basic level, what will this firm in Arizona look like? I mean, how many lawyers will it have? What kind of clients will it serve? What areas of law will it offer?
So we're beginning, obviously, this, as we announced this, we have 2 partners who have joined. We're in the process of recruiting more. We're in active conversation with several of them. We hope this year probably to be somewhere between 7 and 10 partners in the firm. And over the next, the ensuing 18 months or so, probably doubling that and going beyond. I think in terms of the practice area, just to start there, some of it would be obviously driven by the practice areas of the lawyers and the partners that we recruit. We also have learned throughout at Axiom that there are certain practice areas, and those the ones that were listed as we announced this, are particularly ripe and receptive for the kind of value that we bring, where we can do a lot of work, where we can really support in sophisticated legal work for our clients, but may not be in the bet the house kind of matters that warrant actually the premium of law firms. And so this is creating, again, that alignment where the law firm is sort of in lockstep with Axiom so that we can offer that full breadth of service to clients would be really important. We also will have clients that come from the book of business that the partners bring with themselves, as our managing partner has done. And what's exciting about that too is that it anchors us in the Arizona community and the Phoenix community, so that there are some clients out there, and we continue to want to expand on that. And like I said, the companies we can't work with who are pre sort of in-house hire are very exciting for us to get to know a little bit better. So, we have some ambition. It's a build out. We're early days, and I think over the next 2 years, as we learn from the partners and as they take the helm of driving the development of the firm, we'll get this even into greater focus.
And I think it was in the announcement of this in which the managing partner, Levine, said that he's creating a firm unencumbered by billable hours and the traditional partner pyramid. So what does that mean? What will be the billing and compensation structure for clients and for lawyers who work at the firm?
I think this is a really interesting area, because this is where we get, like I said, to innovate within the firm. And many other firms have started doing this, and you've seen it a lot in the UK, but also in the US now, where you have some more virtual firms who have different structures. So what we want is to not be beholden to, minimum billable hours and having to sort of create the math and the pyramid to warrant the bonuses of the partners. So it's a much more streamlined and transparent compensation structure based on how much the partners bill, but their own take. It will also benefit, hopefully, at some point with some economies of scale and the sort of the value that working alongside Axiom, so that they can also staff with, a matter the clients can avail themselves both to the service of the firm, and then where it makes more sense to have an Axiom lawyer support that as well, we'll be able to create these kinds of structure. And so that allows us to bring that value and not need to create all of the overhead and pyramid, and also remove some of the quality of life issues from a law firm. So what we aspire to do is continue Axiom's leadership in diversity and inclusion, in having alternative career pathing for lawyers who may practice in the firm, may practice as much or as little as they want, and continue that self-determination for the lawyers. And so we'll keep innovating within that, and I think we're going to learn a lot. Axiom has not been a law firm, so we're looking to the partners as well to bring their ideas and continue to innovate in that space.
So it sounds like there will be somewhat of a perhaps fluid or open door relationship between Axiom and Axiom, the law firm. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think less open door, because unfortunately the rules still continue to be a bit limited, right? There are lots of Axiom lawyers who are not in Arizona. So from the partnership standpoint, very much limited to Arizona. But in terms of assembling the pieces of the puzzle, if you will, between A and C and Axiom, you can imagine a client on any matter wanting to avail themselves to both. And we will create the structure to make sure that is possible, and benefit from the added supervision that the law firm can provide on our partners to create a bit more capacity for in-house teams.
This is, of course, an alternative business structure, and this is in Arizona, which allows corporate ownership of law practices when approved as an ABS. So what exactly does the ownership structure look like for this law firm?
The ownership structure itself is quite simple. It's a subsidiary of Axiom, 100% subsidiary of Axiom, where the rules become more a bit more intricate, and where we've done a lot of work. You probably know Linda Shealy is our compliance counsel, and we've been working with her for I think over a year now in making sure that we understood all these rules really well. What really matters is the operating structure, is ensuring that the components of the ownership who are not lawyers, who are not part of the law firm, do not interfere with the judgment of the lawyers, do not interfere with their independence. And so everything that we've done to surround the firm with the infrastructure of Axiom, think about IT, HR, other services, is done in compliance with the rules, with novel procedures, novel training within Axiom to ensure that we preserved the independence of the firm. And so that's been extremely important to us, to do this the right way, to show that it can be done. And frankly, it's something that we've been doing at Axiom. We do not interfere with the work of our lawyers ever. And so that's a very similar sort of concept. The way it's implemented under the rules, the Arizona rules of professional conduct, is something we've been very careful about.
So how do you do that? I mean, one of the biggest critiques of among lawyers who have opposed the liberalization of the rules on ownership is the very one that you just talked about, which is this idea that lawyers are somehow going to be beholden to the profit motive of the corporation that owns the law practice, and therefore they will in some way scrimp or somehow put the interests of their corporate overlords ahead of those of their clients. So what kinds of measures do you put in place to ensure that's not a concern for clients?
Well, let's think about the rationale of these arguments, right? I would argue that we have a little bit more faith in the integrity and ethics of lawyers generally. And I practice as an in-house lawyer. My paycheck is from my company. Under that assumption, I am incapable of independent legal judgment. That does not make any sense. I also hope these opponents have never had any medical service in a private hospital, because they probably would question whether the surgery they're about to undertake is a bottom line item or an actual medical care. So I think we have tons of examples that show this just doesn't hold water. That being said, the independent judgment has to be preserved, and it's defensible to have rules around that. So in terms of operationalizing that, we have specific training for anyone at Axiom who might get in contact with confidential information. Imagine an invoice, something like that. They go through a certain training. We track the information. Certain authority is obviously only the partners can decide to take on a client or not. Axiom cannot decide that. I would also argue that it would be pretty short-sighted of us to go mess up with the legal advice, because that is probably the surest way to a catastrophe on the bottom line. And so I think that those things just do not make any sense. Axiom has not today, and for 20 years, has grown without ever interfering with that, because we know that is not the right way to run our business, and certainly to make our lawyers feel really excited about the model and feel that they can do what they do best. So if anything, I think we've created at Axiom, and we continue that at the law firm, an environment that is phenomenally respectful of the independence of the legal judgment. Actually, we respect that very much, which is why we want to show in Arizona that we have the ability to do that and debunk some of these arguments that just don't make any sense. But like I said, it's very pragmatic. It's controls and systems. It's training. It is data retention. It is the rules of delegation of authority, and a lot of education for all of us. And we've been educating ourselves for over a year to really understand that very, very well. And whenever our counsel has recommended something be implemented, we have done so.
By its very nature as a corporate-owned law firm, one of the first ever in the United States, Axiom Advice and Counsel is a different kind of a law firm than the norm. But what will that difference look like to clients? What should they expect when they come to this firm for legal help? I'll ask Catherine about that in a moment, but first, let's hear about the sponsors who so generously support LawNext. Are you still struggling to get documents signed in a hybrid work environment? Practice Panther's built-in e-signature feature can help you streamline the process and eliminate the need for snail mail. With Practice Panther's native e-signature, you can send unlimited signature requests and track the signing status of each document. To learn more about how Practice Panther can speed up your document signing process, visit practicepanther.com and do it today. Welcome back to LawNext. With news this week that the alternative legal services provider Axiom has officially opened its first actual law firm in Arizona, I'm sure many of you listening have questions about how this new firm will function. What should clients expect? How will it lower costs? How will clients be protected? As we return to my guest Catherine Chemnitz, Chief Strategy and Development Officer and Chief Legal Officer at Axiom, I ask her about those questions and more. For a business, a growth business or medium-sized business that comes to Axiom Advice and Counsel, what will be different about the experience for them from going to some other corporate or business law firm in Arizona?
I think in some ways, some of the motion of it will be similar. And that's what we're trying to do, is to be able to, for a client, today, if they come to Axiom, they select a lawyer, they have to go through all of that. We want to simplify that a little bit by giving them also another avenue, which is just to send an email to the law firm, and the law firm will find the right talent, right, within the partner ranks and beyond to just take care of that. I think what they will find, though, is that we have a fairly unique opportunity when you're a company of Axiom scale to support the build out of a law firm for clients and knowing all we know about how clients see value. So, for instance, there will be far more emphasis on the experience in-house of some of the partners. Some will not just be law firm partners. They may come from in-house because we value that understanding of the advice and the operationalization of the law firm advice that we need to have. They will also have the ability to sort of decide whether there are certain things that are, where they can help. You may have an Axiom engagement where we need some extra, again, I mentioned the extra sort of responsibility of the law firm, accountability of the law firm to come in and supervision, and they can then come and be part of that structure for our clients. And again, it will show up in the invoices and the value that they can get through this firm. So it's still a motion of sort of, Axiom kind of brings the talent in, if you will simplify, and has been moving upstream. Part of what Axiom's been trying to do is to increasingly go after that higher quality, higher level work that is sent to law firms more as routine than because it is really bed the house work. And there's a huge amount of that work floating just between in-house and law firms. And so as Axiom and now AAC will join that sort of ecosystem where it can take some of that work so that we reduce the stress that our clients are seeing right now between shrinking budgets and ever increasing law firm rates. And so this is part of the toolkit that they can avail themselves to that bridges the gap a little bit from sort of the traditional ALSP and the full traditional law firm.
So you say that one difference they're going to see is, when the invoice comes. Can you break down a little bit how it is that you will be able to, I'm assuming you mean that you're going to be able to deliver services at a more affordable or perhaps predictable rate. Can you break down more how the firm will be able to do that? What tools or methods or whatever else will it be using in order to make services for these businesses more affordable?
Yeah, sorry. A very simple sort of approach.
Go ahead. Yeah.
More based on the lawyers, the partners taking a piece of their billables versus complicated credits, et cetera, et cetera. And also, we're going to be very, very watchful of the support model so that we don't create, again, that pyramid, and that where there is work that is more appropriate for an Axiom lawyer to do in the traditional sort of Axiom model, that continues to be part of the equation so that we don't have a tension between the two. We just get the best value for the client where the service matches their need the most. And obviously, if the firm needs some additional support, we're also there to provide it.
You mentioned that Linda Shealy, who as your compliance lawyer, could you just, again, for those who aren't not all that familiar with how the programs work in Arizona, could you talk a little bit about who she is and what that means, what her role is?
Yes, of course. Linda is phenomenal. Linda is, among many things, I think we would agree, an ethics expert in the legal industry. She's also the chairwoman of the ABS Committee on Professional Responsibility and Ethics. She has immense experience and advises thousands of law firms in the country. When we set out to explore this strategy and this initiative and creating an ABS law firm in Arizona, we tried to surround ourselves with people who have that expertise and experience, and Linda was one of them. We worked with Crispin Passmore as well, who's very active in this space. And we developed a relationship initially with Linda, her as external, outside counsel on these matters. And as we worked with her over a month and creating, I think, a lot of trust, and she understood what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do this, and the quality of and the care that we were putting in this construct and in this new firm, she and I started this conversation about her joining as a compliance lawyer. And for those who don't know, the Arizona rules require that for ABS were established under this regime, that there is in fact someone who is responsible for ensuring compliance with the Arizona rules. That is now at least permissible to be an external person. Linda is that for us, so she's not joining as an employee. She would continue her practice. But she has been, and for us, it was an immense validation in our approach that she was willing to put her name on this. on this ABS law firm. So we are committed to making her never regret that decision. And so she advises us on things as sort of foundationalize the application that we filed back in February, all the way to all these little intricate, procedures and training. She delivers training to Axiom employees. She reviews the website. She reviews lots of things and make sure that every time we just do it the right way.
I know that Arizona has outlined sort of a set of regulatory objectives for this ABS program, and they include things like protecting and promoting the public interest, promoting access to legal services, advancing administration of justice, encouraging an independent, strong, diverse, and effective legal profession, and promoting and maintaining adherence to professional principles. So how does this law firm fit in with Arizona's regulatory objectives? Obviously, the Arizona Supreme Court thinks it does because they've approved you, but what was the argument to them as to how you do fit within their objectives?
I think it's a few things. One, obviously, upholding the rules and having respect for that was one. I will hit on another one, which is the diversity in the profession. And we intend this firm to be very inclusive and very diverse. And that's something Axiom pays a lot of attention to and is a leader in. And we want that DNA to carry over. But I think there is another aspect that we haven't spoken about, which is this notion of access to justice. Now, it may seem a bit counterintuitive to say, well, you're sort of corporations. How is that helping anyone? They don't need that. And that's a fair comment. I would say that I mentioned before this ability to start going to serve companies that do not have a GC. Now, that is not necessarily some of what some consider access to justice, but it certainly is access to values-driven legal services in that space. And a lot of these smaller companies, these growth companies, are essential to the growth of Arizona, of the U.S. everywhere. And so for us to be able to carry forward the mission of Axiom to deliver that value into a different set of companies that are earlier stage is very important. But I also feel there's an element, I mentioned it before, which is, look, a lot of people have objections to these structure, objections to these changes. And we feel very strongly that if players like Axiom, who are leaders in this field and who have the capacity and the scale to do this, do not show that it can be done the right way, we're going to continue to have the narrative be driven by the opponents. And we need to go out there and demonstrate it can be right. So hopefully a lot of the objections fall aside, change make more sense, and we open the doors for all these innovators, for the access to justice, and for all of these technologies and other structures that are absolutely required to address, failure of the legal system right now. And so, yes, we're not directly maybe in the most obvious way serving that purpose, but I think the Arizona Supreme Court really understood where we came from on that dimension and hopefully supports our approach.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, certainly you're right that a lot of people think about access to justice as meaning access to justice for low-income people or disadvantaged people of some sort. But I know many of the guests I've had on this show who are involved in studying or advocating for access to justice talk about it in a much broader sense that goes across the board, because there are any number of business owners, maybe more so on the smaller end of the business owning spectrum, who themselves just can't get good legal help and can't afford good legal help. And even higher up the ladder, there are any number of businesses who are not having all of their legal problems dealt with because they'll pay for the ones they absolutely have to pay for, but they're letting others kind of just ride because they don't want to have to spend that money. So, I think it's certainly fair to characterize it as an access to justice measure. That does assume you're able to provide those services at a more affordable way and in a more efficient way, which I guess you'll be time will be the test of that, I suppose.
Time will be the test of that, but I think there's also a little bit of I don't know if disingenuous is the right word, but in the discussion and the debate that is happening in the industry around this kind of change, opponents of it would be perfectly fine if this change was just for companies or non-profits who were just to go and do more pro bono type and very much social work type of legal services, because that doesn't threaten them one bit. And so in a way there is an element of if we do not open the door wider, technology is needed, investment is needed. And we can argue whether that is right or not, or how we should improve access to legal justice. There's many different ways. but an antiquated rule around non-ownership of law firm to preserve some kind of sacrosanct, specialty of the legal profession is not the way to have that conversation.
Preaching to the choir on that. I 100%
I can keep
agree
going on that one. Trust me.
So on that point, I mean, now that you are going to be beginning to operate in Arizona, now that you've been approved in the UK, what happens elsewhere in the United States? Is Axiom, as an entity, involved in kind of advocacy around loosening some of the regulatory structure in other states?
Yeah, it's something that actually Linda and Crispin and I talk about quite a bit. So I think the approach we've taken initially is to let our actions speak for themselves. In Arizona, the Arizona ABS law firm is essential to that. Is to don't let me preach to it. Let me show you that we will do it the right way. Let us surround ourselves, and like you said, time will tell a little bit on that. But I do think we're at a point in time where we need to potentially speak up a little bit more. I've often been called by people who say, it's great, we had this discussion with this state or that state, and we talked a lot about Axiom and these alternative providers. I was like, at some point, if you want to talk to us as opposed to talk about us, I'm happy to show up and talk about it, because there's a lot of speculation. And even in Arizona, there's a lot of misgivings about what these ABSs are, what they do, how they operate. And I know Linda is very involved in educating around that. But we do think, I think, as players in the industry who are not from the traditional mold, to come to the table and have these conversations and address, the objections where they are and debunk them in most instances. And then, by the way, where there is real, and I believe there is reason to have regulation around all of this. That's what's so interesting in Arizona, is they haven't said, hey, you know what, let's deregulate and everybody can do what they want. That's absolutely not what they're saying. And so for us, it was actually a huge step to even agree to do something that is regulated, because we're not. And why would we volunteer for that? In some ways, our life could be easier without doing it. But it is extremely important to what we do for our clients, and it is extremely important for the industry. And that's part of Axiom's legacy and DNA. And we're going to keep doing that. And we want to take on these conversations so that we do open the door for a lot more in the industry. So, yes, I think we're going to have to be a bit more vocal. And maybe this podcast is the first time we actually speak about all this openly. So maybe this is a good start.
And you mentioned that there is a lack of understanding, even in Arizona, about these alternative business structure operations. What will you be doing in Arizona to help potential clients understand how you're different, how you're not different, educate the market a little bit, and in fact market your own services? Yeah,
there's a couple of things. So number one, the under the Arizona rules, we have to report on our operations, and so we will continue to do that. It's something that I'm actually thinking about, because I think the Arizona Supreme Court and all the organization over there is this is an early day program still. Is shaping what that reporting looks like, and so maybe we can have a bit of contribution about the transparency of it, around the success of it, and certainly being extremely transparent if there are failures, so that we can correct them and discuss all that. I think for our clients, we're at this point right now where we're starting to operate, so we will be developing with ANC how we share that value proposition. What is the communication? One thing we want to be very cautious about is, obviously, Axiom Advice and Counsel is the one providing legal services. That's not something Axiom just sells or does, in the course, and we don't want to cross that line. So it's very important that the firm has a say in this, which is why the managing partner hire, Matthew Levin, is such an important step for us, so that we now have, to this point around independence, we actually have lawyers accountable for this in Arizona, develop that messaging and develop that value proposition and improve upon what we could do sort of as a bit outsider, even though I'm a lawyer, I'm not an Arizona practitioner under the rules, and take that to the next step. And hopefully these are things we can share going forward about what's worked, what hasn't, where we can improve, the training that's been working, and all of that.
Yeah. You've opened, as of yesterday, as we're speaking right now, officially open for business there. Do you have any clients yet?
We do. Are
you opening with clients?
The moment we're in right now, just very transparently, is transition of the two initial partners, Matt Levin and Jeff Harris, who are joining us. They have clients, some of which would be, are following and coming along with them, and they have live matters. So it's an interesting learning curve, certainly for me and others at Axiom, to sort of, this moment of readiness for us was, we're going to have a partner, we're going to have a client, and we need, in flight to sort of change airports. Yeah. And so we're in that moment, and they are billing to their clients, and we're doing that, and we're really their focus and ours in supporting them is really that client transition and seamless client service. That's the thing that matters the most. And then once they've settled that, we'll be able to kind of build and expand. And by then, hopefully, we will also have additional partners join so that we can have a more robust sort of, not launch, but communication around, like you mentioned, the value proposition, the clients, and see where the interest lies.
Well, Kathy, we're just about out of time, but I always like to give my guests an opportunity to share any kind of final thoughts they have, anything I haven't asked you about that you wanted to talk about, or any other kind of summary of what we've been talking about here today.
No, I think your question covered really a good amount of space there. I think, like I mentioned before, it's a very exciting step forward. It's one we really believe in. It's one we believe in doing right. We are today in a point in time economically where, for all our clients, I think our CEO at some point wrote a piece saying enough is enough, but we do believe that. And we come with this ABS law firm, both with humility to learn and do it the right way, but also a lot of conviction that we bring value to our clients, and we need to be an alternative to the standard law firm approach. And we're going to keep doing that and pushing for that. And hopefully we'll convince other states to come along for the journey. I think they owe that to their lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like a bit of a watershed moment for people who have been kind of following the evolution around re-regulation, regulatory reform over the last few years. And there's, a lot of eyes are on Arizona and on Utah as well to see how this evolves. And I'm sure people will be following with great interest how this evolves. So great for you for doing it. And thanks so much for coming on board today to tell us all about it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks so much for giving it the time of one of your wonderful podcasts.
Thanks again to Catherine Chemnitz for taking the time to speak with me today and share details on the news this week that Axiom has officially opened the law firm Axiom Advice and Counsel as an alternative business structure in Arizona. If you would like to share your own thoughts or comments on today's show, please do so by tweeting us at LawNext Podcast or by emailing me directly, ambrogi@gmail.com. LawNext is produced, engineered, and edited by Populous Radio. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of LawNext.